Hey guys, and welcome to my June roundup video. So you can probably see this is quite a long video, so I'm going to try and explain the premise as quickly as I can. The reason I'm doing this is that I can't really review everything I watch, and I think it would be helpful to give quick reviews sort of and opinions on movies that I just didn't have time to review. After all, quite often I watch films that I really wish I could have reviewed because they were really good and I want you to know about them, but I just didn't have the time. Then on the other hand, there are some reviews that were really bad and I just kind of want to tell people how bad they are. So here's how it's going to be. I'm going to try and go through every single film I watched in June, starting from the beginning of the month and going through progressively to, the end of the month, and let you know when I watched it, what I thought of it, and just in general giving you my opinion. And finally, this video is going to contain a lot of films that I've actually already reviewed, but I'm just going to go over them anyway to, present them in a more compact format for those who don't have the time or, whatever reason. So I'll still talk about them here, but I will link the review in the description, and there you can actually find timestamps for every film, so you can just skip to the films you want to hear about. But I really suggest you give some films you haven't heard about a little bit of a try. But anyway, without further ado, let's start. So Time Lapse is a little known 2014 indie science fiction thriller directed by Bradley King. It's essentially about three young people finding this camera which takes pictures of events 24 hours in the future, and it essentially goes into what these people are going to do with that. I kind of watched this film on a whim and I was so surprised at how good it was. Some people are complaining about bland characters and I can certainly see where they're coming from, but personally I just found the events created by this camera and the way the characters interacted with each other, I was completely taken away by it. I found it so suspenseful. It delivers arguably too many twists, but twist after twist for me completely sold me. I was absolutely invested in the film. I loved what it did, never saw where it was going. I just thought Time Lapse was an absolutely fantastic film that completely, all the way through, had me on the edge of my seat. So I give Time Lapse a 9 out of 10, a must watch as far as I'm concerned. Please give it a try. Now let's take a step down in terms of quality, because on the 3rd of June I also watched Unfinished Business, directed by Ken Scott and starring Vince Vaughn, Dave Franco and Tom Wilkinson, and I really despised this film. I did review it, so there's a link in the description if you want to know more, but I just thought this was a really unfunny comedy with characters that I was expected to care about, but most of them really annoyed me, especially Dave Franco's character, who plays this special needs person that just isn't funny and all he does is smile and say relatively amusing words, I guess. As I said in my review, the only funny joke I found was the bit where he says his name's Mike Pancake. Haha. Pancakes. I mean, really nothing else made me laugh. They tried to make us care about Vince Vaughn's family as well. It's completely ham-fisted. It was an overall completely unfunny comedy. There's pretty much nothing to like about it, and I really don't suggest anyone checks out. I give Unfinished Business a 3 out of 10. A really awful film. On the 4th of June I did get to watch Hard Candy, starring Ellen Page and Patrick Wilson and directed by David Slade. I did review this film as well. You can find that in the description, as I said. The premise of Hard Candy is that Ellen Page plays a 14-year-old girl and she essentially tries to infiltrate on her own this paedophile played by Patrick Wilson. She does some horrible things to this man, and it actually makes for a very compelling film that isn't just based off of the idea of torturing someone using gore and, saw techniques. It's not just a gory film. There's barely any gore to be found in it, to be honest. David Slade uses huge amounts of restraint when gory things are happening. Like, he doesn't show them, he just lets you imagine, and that's kind of the worst part. But of course I mean that in a good way. Ellen Page gives a fantastic performance. Patrick Wilson also gives a fantastic performance, and what David Slade creates here is a very disturbing film with fantastic imagery, good use of colour. I didn't like some ways he filmed, like with some shaky camera bits, but overall I found Hard Candy to be extremely disturbing. Extremely enjoyable is the wrong word, but very much engrossing with such a simple concept, and I think David Slade did a great job, so I give Hard Candy an 8 out of 10. On the 9th of June I watched the SpongeBob SQUAREPANTS movie, and you know what? I had a really good time with it. I did review this one, so link in the description, but the idea of the film is that Plankton has decided once again to try and steal the Krabby Patty formula from Mr. Krabs. And his plan for doing this is by stealing King Neptune's crown, framing it on Mr. Krabs, therefore leaving him incapacitated, and unfortunately SpongeBob gets wrapped up in this quest and he essentially has to go and find the crown, which is hidden in Shell City, which apparently no one returns from. And unless he does this, Plankton will rule the world with the Krabby Patty formula in true, ridiculous SpongeBob SquarePants style, and the SpongeBob SquarePants style is why I like the film. If all of that sounds like complete nonsense to you and you've already seen SpongeBob, then you're not going to like the film. plain and simple. The film is essentially an extended TV episode, and it feels like that. A problem I mentioned in my review is that it feels like an elongated TV episode, but in many ways, many would argue, that's a good thing. One thing's for sure, if you like SpongeBob, you're going to like the film, and it's a very light film, of course, but there are some really funny moments in it. I was laughing all the way through. I thought it was very enjoyable. It was paced fine. You get from event to event to event without too much downtime, but that's fine, because it's jam-packed with jokes, and it's jam-packed with funny action sequences that I really quite enjoyed. So overall, I give the SpongeBob SquarePants movie a 7 out of 10. And of course, immediately following that, on the 9th of June, I also watched the SpongeBob movie Sponge Out of Water. The newest SpongeBob film, which is only recently out, and it kind of conveyed itself to be an adventure above water with CGI animated characters, but that's not the way this goes. The story is that, once again, Plankton is trying to steal the Krabby Patty formula. The Patty formula disappears from him, and SpongeBob and Plankton have to go together to get the Krabby Patty formula back because, of course, the world is falling apart without it. Again, this film is jam-packed with funny SpongeBob humour, and it feels like SpongeBob, but 10 years to me feels like it's kind of changed SpongeBob, and it's not what I remember it to be exactly, though to be fair, it hasn't changed that much. Many of the jokes in the film are funny, but a lot more of them land flat than they did in the last one. On the good side though, this does feel a lot more like a movie than the original SpongeBob SquarePants movie actually felt like. The character is enjoyable as usual, it just feels like a bit of a step down from the first film, and if you were scared about the CGI thing, literally that only occurs in the last half hour or so of the film during the climax, so don't worry about that if that's keeping you away. A lot of you will probably have a good time with it if you like SpongeBob again, but I do feel it's a little bit of a step down, but still not a bad film. I quite enjoyed it, so I give the SpongeBob movie Sponge Out of Water a 6 out of 10. On the 13th of June, I watched a horror film by the name of It Follows. It was released in 2014. It's directed by David Robert Mitchell, and it stars Micah Monroe, Care Gilchrist and Olivia Luccardi. The premise of the film is pretty cool. In this world there exists a creature which will literally walk straight towards you. It won't run, it will walk, and it can look like any human it wants to look like. And the only way to pass on this curse is by having sex with someone, and I really think this is a great concept. It really could have opened up some brilliant ideas. They could have had this incredible social commentary, but I really don't feel like they go into enough depth with it. I did review this film, so link in the description if you want to see what I thought in more depth, but I just thought that even as just a horror film, it starts off really creepy, really great atmosphere. I loved the way it homaged Halloween from 1978. What a great film to try and, be similar to. I really enjoyed those aspects, but it just lost its scares and it lost its edge halfway through, and I think it kind of fell apart with a silly sort of climax in a swimming pool, which I just really wasn't a fan of by that point. And while it is not a bad film and it looks incredible, and the soundtrack of It Follows is absolutely brilliant, and it completely fits the mood, I just think that it doesn't hold up all the way through, and by the end I was like, okay, that's the end. And the ending itself is a little bit like, it really? Is that it? Is that where you're going to end? But it's not the worst. Even though I thought the film was a little bit overrated, I highly suggest you find out your own opinion for yourself. It's gotten brilliant ratings for a reason, and maybe you're going to see those reasons more than I did, but personally, I give It Follows a 6 out of 10. On the 17th of June, I began to prepare for the release of Jurassic World this year, and so where did I start? I started with Jurassic Park, the 1993 film directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Sam Neill, Laura Dern, Jeff Goldblum and Richard Attenborough. And of course, Jurassic Park is heralded as one of the biggest landmark films ever, and that people are completely right. As a technical achievement, Jurassic Park was absolutely incredible. 1993, I can't believe how well the CGI of the film still holds up today, and anyone will tell you the same. And it's also great that Steven Spielberg used animatronics when he thought it was the right thing to do, during close-ups where we would be able to see that that's not a real dinosaur. In that way, it's the perfect textbook way of using CGI in films, and unfortunately 20 years on, films are kind of forgetting the way you're supposed to do it. In this film, Steven Spielberg completely succeeds at creating this incredible sense of wonder with a fantastic theme from John Williams. But the film does suffer in other areas, which lead me to believe this film is overrated, and the reason I thought that was in my review was due to some fairly significant nostalgia goggles. I'll link that review in the description below if you want to know more, but basically I thought that while technically it was incredible, and while this wondrous feeling you get watching it is also incredible, and the film itself is a fun time, the story itself is fairly weak. Yeah, they have this subplot of corporate espionage, which I don't think was explored quite well enough, but it's okay, it's fairly fun as well. The characters, Sam Neill, Laura Dern, they're cartoon characters, and they're fairly enjoyable again, but there's not really any depth to them. The story of the film is essentially a setup to get people eaten by dinosaurs. That might not be totally fair, not many people get eaten, but it is essentially an excuse to create the threat of people getting eaten by dinosaurs, and it's a perfectly fine excuse. I enjoy the film, I think it's a good film, but I think it lacks in other areas. If you want to know more, as I said, link in the description for my review, but overall I give Jurassic Park a very, very suitable 7 out of 10. An enjoyable film. The 19th of June was a very busy day for me, and I began it by watching Ice Cold and Alex, a 1958 British war film directed by J. Lee Thompson. Yeah, I picked this film completely at random, and you can look at the review in the description if you want to know more, but John Mills, Anthony Quayle and Sylvia Sims all give out great performances, especially John Mills as the main character, who is essentially motivated in this war, and he's retreating in South Africa, and he's motivated to do so by beer. I know I might have made this sound like a comedy there, but it really isn't. It's actually a look at alcoholism in war to an extent, although it doesn't go too far into it. It's also a look at humanity in general. Anthony Quayle plays a character with a few more secrets than he'd like to have with this group. It's a story about the fatigue of war and, you know, the demonization of war, but it's also, at its heart, a story about how each side demonizes each other, but it remembers in this film that everyone is human. Even though the minimalist use of a score makes some scenes especially feel a little bit slow, other scenes are also very well done. A scene in a minefield, for example, is very tense and very well filmed by J. Lee Thompson. So yeah, some scenes can feel a bit slow, but overall I thoroughly enjoyed the message delivered by the film. I love the way it handled it, and the ending especially was very, very well done. And overall I give Ice Cold and Alex an 8 out of 10. Please give it a try if you get the chance. Again, on the 19th of June, I watched The Lost World Jurassic Park, the 1997 sequel to Jurassic Park from 1993. But this film is again directed by Steven Spielberg, which should be a good thing, and this time it stars Jeff Goldblum, Julianne Moore, Vince Vaughn and Richard Attenborough. And overall, I thought this film was really, really boring, dull, and just poorly executed in general. I mean, it starts off okay, and Jeff Goldblum is fine as the star, which surprised me, to be honest, because I find him kind of annoying in the first film, but he does a fine job. The problems arise later on in the film when more stuff starts happening. It's starting between groups, and it kind of gets all muddled, and that really lost me. Also, I found some action sequences overlong and not very involving, and it suffers in the same way as the first one, that the story is fairly weak, but this film doesn't have that incredible sense of wonder surrounding it, which makes it a good film. It lacks those qualities that elevate a Jurassic Park above your typical schlock movie, and because of that, it's just not very good and very boring to watch, I found. It ends in a climax which is fairly enjoyable, but by then I'd already checked out the film and it really couldn't save it. So overall I give The Lost World Jurassic Park a 4 out of 10, and I really don't suggest giving it a watch if you're going to catch up with Jurassic Park. Again, on the 19th of June, I watched Jurassic Park 3. This time Steven Spielberg didn't return to direct, he instead handed it off to Joe Johnston, and this film stars Sam Neill, again from the first film, William H. Macy and Taya Leone as a really annoying character. So this film is often called the worst in the Jurassic Park franchise, and personally, I don't think that's true, but it is by no means a good film. I just think it's better than The Lost World, and why do I think that? Well, I reviewed it, so if you want to know more, in the description, but basically, this film is 90 minutes long, and that means there is more compact action in it. That might sound really shallow, but don't get me wrong, I didn't enjoy this film. The other aspects of the film, for example, the characters are really boring and dull. The story itself is just not, it's practically non-existent. I mean, they're just running away from stuff the whole time. And somehow the special effects have managed to take a step back from the original film back in 1993. You know, 8 years prior to this. But this film kind of acknowledges that it's a bit of a B-movie film. It's just a monster movie now. That's all this film really is. And all these events are occurring in a compact 90-minute time. The story is constantly moving, even though it's not enjoyable. It's constantly moving. Stuff is always happening. And by the end, you kind of are bored, but you're not as bored as I personally was in The Lost World Jurassic Park, which is an extra half hour longer than this. The story doesn't get too convoluted like it does in that film, and it just kind of, as I often say, happens to you and you just kind of let it. It's a little bit of fun, but overall a bad film. I give Jurassic Park 3 a 5 out of 10. And again on the 19th of June, yeah, it was a horrifically busy day. I managed to see Jurassic World in the cinemas. This film is directed by Colin Trevorrow from Safety Not Guaranteed, and it also stars Chris Pratt, Bryce Dallas Howard, Irfan Khan, Vincent D'Onofrio, Ty Simpkins, Nick Robinson, a bunch of people, basically. As you all know, this remake of the franchise essentially envisions the park being opened for real, and people are coming, and not only has it been open, but it's been open for 10 years, and people are starting to get bored, so they decide, let's make bigger, scarier dinosaurs, and of course, this bigger, scarier dinosaur escapes and kills some people. Now, the film is perfectly enjoyable, but it's really, really dumb. I still think it's a good film, and I genuinely think it's the second best Jurassic Park film that they've made. Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard do good jobs starring. The training wrapped a bit that apparently people had a big problem with is done fine. Vincent D'Onofrio plays a really silly and cartoonish villain, which is okay, I guess. It's a lot of dumb fun, really, but I just feel like his acting skills were underutilized because he is a fantastic actor. The special effects, of course, are great. The animatronics are only used once in this film. You know, they've, of course, dialed it back a bit, but the animatronics look way better than the animatronics did in Jurassic Park back in the day, so fair play to them. And the CGI, of course, looks way better. Overall, the film has a decent threat in the form of an entire park of people that could die, and that's what kind of drives it along. But some narrative silliness, like getting distracted with these two kids, isn't very interesting, and subplots are tried to put in, but they're not that great. Overall, it's a fun action film with a pretty interesting climax. I quite enjoyed it. It's dumb fun. Not as good as the first film, but the spectacle is there, just the sense of wonder hasn't been captured again. Jurassic World, I give a 7 out of 10. On the 21st of June, I watched a documentary called Fed Up, and I didn't get time to review this one, even though I absolutely adored it. The film is directed by Stephanie Soektig, and again, I still can't say the name, I'm so sorry. And this film really goes into the detail of the obesity epidemic, as the news people call it. You might say you've heard this before, and I understand where you're coming from, but it really goes into the details of why is it that some people can exercise more and eat less and stay fat. It goes into heavy detail on the food industries themselves, on politics in general, and how that actually it comes into it, and the ignorance of people that stops them from being able to lose weight, despite some of them trying. It makes us aware of how kids are being roped in from a young age, and it's just unfair how much advertising we surround them with of food that is going to eventually kill them if they eat too much of it. It discusses the corruption of governments and that they realise they need the food industry, so they adhere to many of their whims for the sake of money. In the end, the film asks the question, are you fed up? And yeah, everyone who watches this, I'm pretty sure, is going to be pretty fed up once they see this. This film makes you mad at the food industry, and it's absolutely worth a watch. So incredibly educational, and not in the most boring of ways like it may seem. It incites a genuine emotional reaction. And for that reason, I give Fed Up a 9 out of 10, a must-watch documentary. On the 22nd of June, I watched one of the Best Picture nominees from the 2015 Oscars, The Theory of Everything, starring Eddie Redmayne, Felicity Jones, and directed by James Marsh. I meant to see this in cinema, didn't get the chance, and I finally got around to watching it, and what did I think? I thought it was good. Did it deserve Best Picture? No. Did it deserve to be nominated for Best Picture? Absolutely not. It does not deserve that kind of credit. It is merely a competent and overly romanticised film. The story's fairly simple. It's of Stephen Hawking's life, detailing his relationship with Jane, played by Felicity Jones, from when he was at Cambridge University all the way up until, you know, later in life. I won't spoil how far it goes. It does do a good job of detailing his relationship, I guess, and his decline, his physical decline due to motor neuron disease. That's well done too. It's quite heartbreaking to watch, but other elements don't really flow so well. For example, I found his wife Jane to be a fairly boring character, and you know, she's one of the big parts of the film, one of the stars, so that's a little bit lost for me. And the biggest problem definitely is that the film just doesn't focus on his scientific life enough. People love Stephen Hawking because of his scientific endeavours, and this film does not exploit that enough. It focuses way too much on his relationship, and yeah, it's done relatively well. It's very schmaltzy, but they do it okay. But it's just, that is such a big part of Stephen Hawking and who he is. It's such a huge part, and I can't fathom why they left out so much. Yeah, they go into it a bit, but it's really not even close to how much they should have. And if they had done that, I really think this movie could have been Best Picture material, and apparently some people think it was, but in my honest opinion, it's not. But don't get me wrong, it is still a good film, an enjoyable watch with some pretty heartbreaking moments. So I give The Theory of Everything a 7 out of 10. On the 24th of June, I was lucky enough to rewatch for the third time Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance, film directed by Alejandro González Iñárritu. I hope I said that right. Stars Michael Keaton, Zach Galifianakis, Edward Norton, Naomi Watts, Emma Stone, and Andrea Riseborough. Now, of course, Birdman was actually a Best Picture winner, and do I believe it deserved it? Absolutely. Birdman is one of my favourite films of all time. The story is essentially about a washed-up ex-superhero actor, Michael Keaton. There's some meta for you, who's now trying to get a bunch of people together to do a play called What We Talk About When We Talk About Love by Ray Carver, and he is really putting a lot of effort into this, but people around him only remember him as Birdman, his ex-superhero persona, and he wants it to be his ex-superhero persona. That's not who he wants to be anymore. He wants to be recognised for doing real art, and that's only the surface. I'm not going to go any further into it. It is an absolutely incredible film. It has so much to say about the movie industry today, about movies in general, about art, about critics, about duality. There is just so many themes in this film. Every time I watch it, I learn more. I can't wait to watch it again. There is just so much thematic depth. The writing is incredible, the acting is incredible, the character designs are incredible, and the whole concept behind everything is just so well done, and I'm absolutely in love with Birdman. This is one of the only films where, legitimately, every time I watch it, it gets better and better. I know some people have problems with it because it's a little bit confusing, but seriously, put your mind to it. This is a film that you've got to sit there and you've got to decode. You've been given the tools, now you just got to use them. I can't recommend this film highly enough. Please, please, if you get the chance, watch Birdman, and I hope you see what I mean. A lot of people are saying that the only reason people like it so much is because it's all made to look like it's taken in one shot. And yeah, maybe a lot of people are giving that a little bit too much credit, because, you know, people get really, really happy about long shots, don't they? But trust me, the one take aspect in this film really does add to it, and it breaks down completely the barrier between audience and the characters, you know. There's no camera, we are just watching. That might not make sense to a few of you, but trust me, it adds so much to the film, and I can't help but give Birdman a 10 out of 10, one of my favourite films of all time. On the 26th of June, I rewatched John Wick, starring Keanu Reeves, Michael Nyqvist and Alfie Allen, and directed by Chad Stahelski and David Leitch, who was apparently uncredited. Not sure why that is, but the two of them have put together a really great film here, a very good action film. Fairly shallow, admittedly, but it is a great fun time, and it does what it does very well. It's kind of like a better version of Taken. The story involves an ex-hitman by the name of John Wick, played by Keanu Reeves, and his wife has just died. He quit the business because he really wanted to be with his wife, and she's just died, so he's, you know, filled with sadness and remorse. And then his wife, you know, prematurely somehow, it's kind of odd, has decided that he needs a dog for when she's gone. So he's like, oh look, cute dog, and the audience are like, oh yeah, cute dog, but then the dog gets killed by Alfie Allen's character, and John Wick gets mucho mad and decides, that's it, you've angered me, I'm gonna get you. And what we get is a tale of revenge with some really great scenes. For example, when we see the rage of John Wick and we get this guy narrating to us who John Wick is for the first time, and we just see these shots of him going down the stairs in darkness, him showering with his tattoos. Sounds very homoerotic. When he's got the sledgehammer and he's just hammering over this voiceover, and it's like, okay, this guy's legit, and he has a genuine presence from then on. And what makes John Wick stand out is the action sequences, because the camera is able to just sit and watch action take place. There's no endless cut. Keanu Reeves does his own stunts, and apparently the way they shoot and reload and stuff is done really realistically, and there's a certain style to it. You know, I'm not a martial arts nut, but a lot of people are, and they're like, yeah, that's real, that's the way they do it, and I'm glad that they recreated something faithfully. Yeah, the story's fairly bare bones, but it provides a brilliant context of what is going on. It's very enjoyable to watch, with some brilliant scenes. The nightclub scene, people have said, is good to death, and I'm going to beat it to death even more. The nightclub scene is great. Keanu Reeves does a great job as a character, and I actually really enjoyed John Wick, and overall I'd give it an 8 out of 10. If you're an action nut, definitely worth a watch. Even if you're not big on action, if you like Taken, you're going to like this too. Now, on the 27th and the 29th of June, I watched The Terminator from 1984, directed by James Cameron and starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Michael Biehn and Linda Hamilton. I was doing this in preparation for the new film, which I absolutely despised, and I did get to reviewing The Terminator, and I'll link that in the description below. But what did I think here? Quickly, well, I think it's a very good sci-fi action film made on a shoestring budget of 6.5 million. Might sound like quite a lot, but keep in mind this is a science fiction film which is pretty heavy on special effects, and often, well, sometimes the effects show, but overall it's done pretty well. The Terminator is essentially a chase film. Arnold Schwarzenegger does a great job as this huge, hulking, robotic mass that has one objective: to kill Sarah Connor. Linda Hamilton does a good job as Sarah Connor. Michael Biehn does a good job as Kyle Reese. The story in the background of the film is great, but the story in front of it, while slightly weaker, is good enough to give context to the chases that occur. It's essentially a chase film. There's this constant idea that the Terminator is coming for you, similar in a way to It Follows. You know it is always coming for you. They don't leave as much to the imagination in this film, but it's kind of the same. The action sequences are great. The downtime, not as great, but it's still pretty good for what it is, and the climax of the film is absolutely fantastic, regardless of some dodgy special effects. So I give The Terminator an 8 out of 10. A very good science fiction film. On the 28th of June, I watched Terminator 2 Judgment Day from 1991, again directed by James Cameron, and of course the sequel to the original Terminator film. I did review this one, so you can find that link in the description if you'd like to know more, but Terminator 2 is basically a bigger and better version of the Terminator. An absolutely timeless film with fantastic special effects. CGI was beginning to be used by this point, not with the photorealism that Jurassic Park used it, but the T-1000 Terminator uses CGI so well, and James Cameron, of course, uses restraint with the technology. Yeah, there's not much he could have done with it at the time, but practical effects are utilised perfectly. Action sequences are so well done, so many memorable chase sequences in this, and they mix the formula up sufficiently to make the film viable after seeing the first film. You know, this just feels like the first film, but not in a bad way. It feels bigger, better, and just so good. So it's a great action film when you throw in some greater thematic depth with Arnold Schwarzenegger and the character of John Connor, played by Edward Furlong. You have a really good action film, an absolutely timeless film. I gotta give Terminator 2 Judgment Day a 9 out of 10. An absolute must watch for any movie fan. On the 28th of June, again, I watched Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines, the third film in the Terminator franchise, of course, from 2003, directed by Jonathan Mostow and starring, again, Arnold Schwarzenegger, this time with Nick Stahl as John Connor, Claire Danes as Kate Brewster, and Kristanna Loke as the female Terminator. Now, the problem at this point in the franchise is the formula was getting a little bit stale. Terminator 1 did its own thing. Terminator 2 did that similar, but flipped on its head sufficiently that we were like, okay, we can do this again, and it worked very well. This film doesn't really change anything, really. I mean, it makes the enemy Terminator a woman, I guess, but it doesn't really utilise the fact that she is a woman, so it's not really a change worth talking about, though it probably had noble intentions. Yeah, once again, a Terminator's been sent back to kill John Connor, and Arnold Schwarzenegger plays the good Terminator who's going to protect him, and yeah, it's okay, it's not awful, it gets a lot more flack than it deserves. It is definitely better than Terminator Genesis, don't let anyone tell you different. It's a relatively fun time. There are some really dumb action sequences which are okay to watch. The transition from practical to CGI, you know, being 20 years on from the first film was evident, a lot more CGI, and some of the action sequences feel cartoony, so it kind of lessens the impact of them. The characters are okay, they tell a lot of jokes, there's a lot goofier this time around, and they repeat loads of dialogue, something they do way worse in Genesis, by the way. It's not a crime by any means in this film, but it does, it adds to the fact that we've been here before and it feels like it, and now it's a little bit stale. Definitely not the worst film in the franchise. If you want to see more of what I thought, the review is in the description, and overall I give Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines a 6 out of 10. Not awful, fairly average with a few good bits, you know, it's an okay watch. Yeah, 28th of June was a Terminator Day, and I topped off the day with Terminator Salvation, the fourth in the franchise from 2009, directed by Mick G, starring Christian Bale, Sam Worthington, and Anton Yelchin, and basically it was believed to be the worst in the franchise by many people, pretty much everyone that has seen them all. As far as I'm concerned, that's changed. Genesis is way worse in my opinion, but others will disagree, so whatever. But Terminator Salvation is not a good film. It's set in the future this time. I appreciate it for trying. It did try and change the formula that we'd had in the first three films. I give it credit for that, but that's essentially it. We're in 2018 now. In the future, the war against the machines is going on. Christian Bale plays John Connor. Sam Worthington plays a character called Marcus who's got these secrets which get revealed in the film. They were revealed in the trailer, so it completely ruins them. Twist is ruined. Why don't Terminator films understand that you stop ruining everything in the trailers? And essentially in the future, John Connor is leading an assault against Skynet with his big plan, and Skynet have their big plan to kill Kyle Reese in the future, which of course in the film is the present. And in doing so, Kyle Reese won't be able to be sent back, and he can't be John Connor's father, all that weird Terminator-y stuff. But they do somewhat change it, but the problem is, this film is straight up boring. Sam Worthington, I mean, I said in my review, which I'll link in the description, that he is basically the 2009 version of Jai Courtney. We were being force-fed this guy to try and get us to like him, and he's such a bland actor. And Christian Bale is a good actor, but is not given the focus of the film, and his character of John Connor, leader of the future, is changed to be a subordinate, and Christian Bale just doesn't get to do what he wants to do in the film. So John Connor's boring, Sam Worthington is boring, the twist is spoiled, and the aesthetic of the film, so grey, so dull. Even the explosions look washed out, and that could have really provided a good contrast to the grey landscape, you know, a big fiery yellow explosion. But no, they look washed out, and it means a lot of the action's really boring. Story in general is lackluster characters, I mean, everything is just, again, boring. And I give Terminator Salvation a 5 out of 10. Just a very, very average film in pretty much every way. At least they tried, but it doesn't come through. Then on the 29th of June, I watched SHREK, which I hadn't seen for years since I was, you know, much younger. So there's a slight nostalgia factor which is worth talking about. Didn't get a chance to review it, but SHREK is an incredible film. A fantastic animated comedy starring Mike Myers as SHREK, Cameron Diaz as Fiona, Eddie Murphy as Donkey. It's just an animated classic. The jokes are hilarious. The animation is a little bit stilted nowadays, but give it credit. This was, you know, about 10 years ago. Story I thoroughly enjoyed, and just the way the characters interact with each other, I just thought it was really quite great. Thoroughly enjoyable film. I could watch it over and over again, and I highly recommend it to anyone. SHREK I give a 9 out of 10. Following on from that, on the 30th of June, I watched SHREK 2, and I found out that I actually prefer it to the first one. Mike Myers, Eddie Murphy and Cameron Diaz return again to go for a story where they go to far, far away to meet Fiona's parents, who are obviously human, after Fiona has been turned into an ogre by SHREK. But of course they were expecting Fiona to return back with Prince Charming and for her to have had the curse broken and come back as a human, and because of that, shenanigans ensue. Yeah, I thought SHREK 2 was a marked improvement on the first one. The characters are still, you know, interesting and great. Great voice actors from John Cleese, Julie Andrews, all sorts of stuff. Rupert Everett as well, all do great jobs, and the jokes this time are even funnier and a lot wittier and more sharp-edged and satirical. People often say that some animated movies are for adults and for kids, and that's what really they try and sell them on. Well, SHREK 1 tried this, but it only really did it by telling, you know, jokes about genitals. Although the joke about Snow White where the mirror says, although she lives with 7 other men, she's not easy, that's incredible. But this film delivers even more stuff like that, and like scenes where just subtly people run out of Farbucks coffee and run across the road to go into another Farbucks coffee. Just satirical scenes that are subtle like that. I really enjoyed all the way through the film. Such a brilliant movie, really. It's hilarious and the story is great. I just really love SHREK 2, and I think it's an improvement on the first by just a little bit, so I give SHREK 2 a 9 out of 10 also. On the 30th of June, I also rewatched Kenneth Branagh's Cinderella from earlier this year, and I did get to see it in the cinema, and I very much enjoyed it, and I reviewed it, and if you want to know what I thought in more detail, take a look in the description, I'll link you to it. But it stars Lily James, Cate Blanchett, and Richard Madden, and they all do great jobs. Cate Blanchett absolutely laps the role as the evil stepmother up, and she's having a great time. Does a very cartoonish portrayal, but the best cartoon you'll ever watch sort of portrayal. The story's the same old Cinderella story, I'm not going to go into it, but Kenneth Branagh directs it with sufficient energy and colour, and he realises that what he's directing is a fairy tale film, and he doesn't really try and change it. Some might view that as a bad thing, and in many ways it kind of is, but I think it's a good call on his part, because what other fairy tale films have we had? Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters? Alice in Wonderland? Snow White and the Huntsman? The best one we've got was Jack the Giant Slayer, and really, that's not saying much. So he decides to keep it simple, keep it grounded to its base, and yeah, it really works. Helena Bonham Carter makes an appearance as the fairy godmother, does a fantastic job, she's hilarious, and she has blonde hair. still kind of mesmerised by that. It's a very colourful story, it's beautiful to look at, but it's got a very ham-fisted moral of be kind and have courage. And yeah, I expect that from Disney. It's fine, as long as kids get the message, but watching it again, it's kind of annoying. And the film is thematically light, to be fair. It works as a story, but rewatching it, it kind of diminishes it, but that doesn't take away from the first viewing, so I give Cinderella a very good 8 out of 10. And the last film I watched in June, on the 30th, is Brian De Palma's Mission Impossible, starring Tom Cruise, Ving Rhames, Jean Reno, and Emmanuel Beat. Oh, and of John Voight, of course. So I started watching Mission Impossible, you know, preparing for Rogue Nation that's coming out sometime soon. I don't know exactly when, but Mission Impossible was from 1996, and it's a pretty good film, though it does have a lot of flaws, especially in terms of its narrative and screenplay. The story is very convoluted. Very convoluted. It was really hard to keep up with. If you're on your phone for this film, you're really not going to know what's going on. I personally wasn't. I still had to rewind and like keep my ears open and really figure out what was going on. I just found it a little hard to keep up with, to be honest, and that reduced the effect of some twists that the film delivers. But on the other hand, Brian De Palma has this proper eye, this stylized eye for, you know, what he should do with his camera during action sequences. The first sequence of the film, which isn't really action-based, allows us to sort of observe as these characters do their thing. And I said in my review, which I'll link below if you want to watch it, that like James Bond, it's interesting just to watch them do spy stuff. And as a spy thriller, this film creates a great atmosphere. And another action sequence later, where they go into this room where you have to be like quiet and you gotta not make any noise, that is one of the best action sequences I have ever seen. He uses silence so well. Tom Cruise does a good job. I just think Mission Impossible really suffers from its like convoluted story. If it didn't have that, it would be such a great film. But given that, action sequences are really good, and overall it is a good, solid film, so I give Mission Impossible a 7 out of 10. And that's all I watched this June. If you stuck around for this whole video, you're a better person than I am, and I thank you so much. And if you like this video, please like and favourite in the boxes below. You know what to click. And if you really liked it, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know, and there's always going to be more content coming. And just thank you again so much for watching. I'll see you in my roundup of July in about a month's time.